Hey there guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host and friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Might have to change that nickname because it got me in, although it's a joke from after the Southport thing when Keir Starmer came out and basically blamed everything on the far right. So basically at that point we're all far right, and if everything is to be believed, some things are to be believed of what classifies as terrorism nowadays, a lot of just regular concerned people are now terrorists and far right thugs. So I thought, why not call myself the friendly neighbourhood far right thug as a little bit of a joke? But that got me into some hot water recently. Maybe I'll tell that story in a little bit, but not yet. Anyway. So, right, sorry, I just wanted to mess with one of my settings at the moment. So, I've got some things to go over. So, if you have not been aware of what's been going on recently, ladies and gentlemen, as you may know, I had a guest on the podcast by the name of Justine Winter. Justine is an ex-NHS nurse and whistleblower. And I'm just pulling up something now, ladies and gentlemen, because I wanted to showcase this for you in case you hadn't had chance to go and see the interview yet. This will give you a little bit of an insight into basically what you're missing if you haven't gone and listened to the interview or watched the interview yet. It's up on my YouTube channel and Spotify and Rumble and all the other outlets now on Voice of the Valleys. But in case you haven't seen it, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little bit of a snippet from that interview. A couple of snippets. It's about 3 minutes long, so enjoy.
The stuff I'm about to say, like I said, it's very important. Public concealment, it needs to stop because you need to know what to expect when you're going into hospital. I haven't worked now for 2 years. I'm still a nurse. And it's because of whistleblowing. It's because of raising concerns. I don't know if you do know what a rogue nurse is. But a rogue nurse is somebody who's not a nurse. And these actually filter throughout the trusts. And I did notice it. I've even got a picture of they don't know what they're doing. They're not pub trained. They can't do IVs, cannulas. When it comes to the rogue staff, just didn't want to know. And then later on is the tax avoidance. And then in December 22, there was the cocaine party. You mentioned there was an incident, I think, when you were on the paediatric ward. I'm not going to say anybody's name here. Are you referencing the incident you told me about where there was a young boy aged 9 that sadly died? Is that the incident you were told to be quiet about? Yes. All the talk behind my back. Didn't get references. I've had to go to my MP to get references. So, I can't obviously name the person, but they kept the room for a VIP, right? Now, this VIP wasn't even in the trust. She wasn't even unwell. But they kept a room for her while we had patients on the floor in agony. I've actually told the police everything and they still don't want to know, which is shocking. And then, next thing then, I had a wheel nut off a truck. I've actually kept it, and I had a rock that actually broke into 2, and they just missed my patio doors at the back. She was my agency. She sided with the NHS. They knew about the tax avoidance, and that's how it all works, you know? You go into any hospital, you check that nurse's bag. Yeah. And if you're not quite sure, right, you mention it. You bring it up. We had a handover. We were told that £10,000 worth of drugs gone missing. Why is the codeine and the diazepam going missing? The pharmacist should be involved. The pharmacist should be saying, do you know what? I get it now. There is a possibility that £10,000 worth of drugs is going missing, because what you could do is you could go to recess, right, and some random would just come up and ask you for drugs. Really? And you don't even know where they come from, and that's what I said. These rogue nurses, they can, as I said, it's organised crime, George. They can get anything. I know that each manager has lied. It's, again, very guilty until proven innocent. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed that. I know it's a little bit on the long side when I do these sort of trailers and that. I think for the next one, which I have got somebody on the podcast coming on next week as well,
ex-teacher, which is going to be very, very interesting. If you're in Wales, you're living in Wales in particular, especially the education system, if you don't think your children are being indoctrinated into very far left-wing radical, almost like a religious orthodoxy, I promise you they are. I promise you they are, and you really need to pay attention, not only from the things that I've said in the past and how I've stuck my neck out there on some occasions trying to bring attention to this stuff, knowing that happened in one incident recently where things that I'd drawn attention to in the past ended up coming up to bite me in the ass, and I was recently relieved of my post at one of the jobs that I was at. So that's what is going on, ladies and gentlemen, in Wales. If you don't think that we are as I said, politically correct, Politburo run society with enforced blasphemy laws that are in line with the secular radical left wing orthodoxy, then you really need to go and look at these things. You really need to go and listen to Justine. You really go listen to Victoria, and you definitely need to listen to what's going to be coming out next week and the things that we're going to be going over today, ladies and gentlemen. So I've got a couple of things from my X feed that I wanted to pull up. Some very, very troubling things, especially if you live in the town of Abergavenny. So if you live in the town of Abergavenny, which is actually where the hospital is, where I was born, it's on my birth certificate, actually, even though I'm not technically from there, because that's not where I was raised, but the hospital was there, so that's actually where I was born. You really need to pay attention to this. So this is from Nation Cymru. David Atherton shared this on his X page. And it's actually an incident, I suppose, of what you could call vandalism. But as we'll get into in a moment, there's a very clear reason why this, act of vandalism, which is not anything as far as property damage is being done, as far as I can see, it's just graffiti. But on the council-owned building, which has been earmarked for the Welsh County's first mosque, has been spray painted with the words "No Masjid" on it. Allegedly, according to this is from Nation Cymru, as I said, there's also been Christian crosses spray painted on the building as well, although I can't see any in the feature photo that they have shown. But a council-owned building, so Monmouthshire Council's ruling cabinet agreed in May to grant a 30-year lease to the Monmouthshire Muslim Community Association, who plan to use the former Abergavenny Library as a mosque and cultural centre. It stands to be the county's first mosque. This should put every single Welsh person in this area on high alert and on a serious level of tension, because this is not good. This is not good whatsoever. We've seen what happens up and down the country when these things pop up. We've seen what happens when these cultural centres come in. We've seen what happens when it's one step to the other. Sooner or later, it'll be a Sharia council, and then it will be Sharia law is being enforced. We've seen that. And a lot of the places that the biggest radicalization comes out of are out of these mosques. You had hate preachers like Anjem Chowdhury and all these people that were radicalizing young Muslim men in mosques. And God, whatever else took place. There's a video which I featured, I believe, a little while ago of I believe it was either a young boy or a young girl that was praying in whatever section of the mosques they were supposed to. By the way, it's fine when Muslims do it. We talk about sex segregation, and that's not okay. It's fine when Muslims do it. Anyway, point being is that the adult male went into this section where the child was praying and took them into a back room, and the next thing you know, they're coming back out, and what do you think they're taking them in the back room to do, which is permissible in their religion? So the fact that the Monmouthshire Council have agreed to this for a 30-year lease shows that they are complicit. They are complicit in this, and every Abergavenny person should be taking them to task. If you live in Abergavenny, you should be taking them to task over this. You should have a problem over this, and you should have a problem if not only if you live in Abergavenny, but you live in anywhere in the surrounding area, that now, quite clearly, the Muslim population of that area is growing to an extent where this can actually receive enough support and they will go along with it. Okay, think about it. If there's no Muslims living in an area, similarly, if there's no any other ethnic group or any other religious group living in an area, you don't necessarily need a cultural center and a place of worship for them. Okay, so for example, not a lot of Christians live in many areas of the Middle East now, and that's why you see not a lot of churches, or many instances, churches being taken down and vandalized, and statues of the Lady Mary, of Mother Mary being taken down and destroyed, statues of Christ being taken down, crucifixes being broken. We see that in England. We don't even have to go to the Middle East to see that. But wherever these people go, make no mistake, very rare do good things follow. And from what we've seen, where even Muslims out in the Middle East, like you have, what's the guy's name? I think he goes by Imam for Peace on X or whatever, that are saying that Britain is becoming more of a hotbed for Islamic extremism than Muslim countries in the Middle East are, via their affiliations with like the Muslim Brotherhood and those kinds of groups, okay? So this should be very, very worrying. This should be very, very worrying to every single one of you. Make no mistake. This is just one part. This is just one part. It's not going to take very long before sooner or later, unless we do something, we'll all be living under Muslim rule. Make no mistake about it. And this is what really gets me when I try to talk to people about this, is that, you know, whatever's going up and down the country, I don't care. I'll deal with it when it comes here. Well, I'll be like, okay, well, now it is here. Not only that, what if we'd paid attention, 10 years ago or even more, instead of shouting people down as racist and all of these kinds of things? Obviously, people like me, we didn't stand a chance. We were only 15 years old. We didn't know any better that time ago. But many people now still won't wake up to the reality of what's going on. They're still digging their heads in the sand because they haven't seen the overt, disgusting things that have been revealed in like the grooming grounds transcripts and stuff like that right close to their home. They think that it's not a problem, and they think, oh, it's just a mosque, It's just a mosque. It's just a cultural centre. It's just sharing culture. Now, sooner or later, you're going to end up with a dominant culture. Right now, the dominant culture is a secular culture, and it has been for a little while. A secular, atheistic, almost liberalist culture. That's not going to last because its principles are not strong enough to enable it to last. That is collapsing under the weight of its own incongruence. So what's again going to take its place? It's going to be something like Islam, as it has done in many areas up and down the country. If you're a British person, especially if you're a person now that lives in Abergavenny, you really need to start taking into account this now. Sooner or later, your little quiet, rural Welsh valley towns are going to become a lot like Luton. They're going to become a lot like Oldham and all of these other places, unless we do something, unless we demand change from our politicians, and unless we're actually willing, not physically necessarily, but to fight them and to go toe-to-toe with them rhetorically and hold them to account, because they represent us. This is them representing foreign interests, because Islam is foreign. Islam is foreign to the UK, and it was imported by a political class that had no business doing so, that had no right to do so, and that should be imprisoned for doing so. But again, 30 years. A 30-year lease has just been granted to the Monmouthshire Muslim Community Association, planning to use the former Abergavenny Library as a mosque and cultural centre. I made no mistake, this is perfectly in line with what the Welsh Government's vision for Wales is, to make it anti-racist and decolonised and all of these other lovely little adjectives, right? But this gives me a little bit of hope, not for like the vandalism or anything like that, which and the graffiti being sprayed. It gives me a little bit of hope to show that knowing that there's, I would imagine it was a young person that done this, not from like the generation slightly older than me. They're a lot more carefree, the Richard Tice types that go, oh yeah, I'm not going to be here, so I don't need to worry about it. That classic interview which he gave recently, which really torpedoed his credibility even more somehow. I think he's somewhere just Keir Starmer's like down in the Mariana Trench. I think he's like in the middle of the abyssal zone right now. So he's like halfway up between the sea level and the bottom of the Mariana Trench, somewhere around Richard Tice and Nigel Farage is there. And, Nicholas Lysak is down there trying to get whatever he can as well. You know what I mean? But it really does show me, and this is a conversation I had with the person that's going to be coming on the podcast next week, is that young people are waking up to this. Young people are waking up to this. And it's really, really good to see. So you're seeing the graffiti, by the way, says, or no masjid. No masjid is what it says on the wall here, ladies and gentlemen. So if I go full screen a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I'll show you the article. I'll show you the image in question. So this is it. This is what's been sprayed outside the Abergavenny Library. This is what's been sprayed outside the Abergavenny Library. So that's what I mean. If you look on the image, ladies and gentlemen, if you can see, I can't see any Christian crosses anywhere on the wall or anything like that. Could very well be. It could just be a different image. But again, it shows that people are awake to what's going on. They've seen it. Here we go. So we have got another image, ladies and gentlemen. So again, this is a cross that's been drawn on the wall on what looks to be another wall of the library itself. So again, people are waking up. Not only people are waking up, they're reclaiming their heritage. They're reclaiming this essential part of their heritage. They've now seen how unfulfilling, and not only that, how much danger this secular ideology, this secular atheist liberal ideology has put them in. And I think is what people are seeing more and more and more now, at least what people are saying on social media, for example, that I've seen, especially with young males. Pardon me. Especially with young males. There's definitely been a substantial lurch to the right, the right of politics. Obviously, many of them are going to potentially risk going full circle and coming back almost like the nationalist socialist route. Don't necessarily want to see that, obviously. You know, we don't want to end up in that kind of like fascist state, I don't think, but there's certainly massive problems that we need to deal with. And I saw somebody put something on social media the other day. It was like, the next election is going to be basically a referendum on immigration and Islam. Those are going to be the two most important factors. And I am in tendency to agree, because those things, especially immigration and remigration in particular, it's getting harder and harder now to make the case that is not going to be necessary for Britain. And even you're a nationalist bent, and you don't want to necessarily classify all of the nations being one nation together. And, you know, we're separate nations, but we're all landlocked together. Whatever you want to say, call it Britain, call it the nations of Great Britain, or call it the nations of the United Kingdom, whatever you want to call it, it all refers to the same thing. At the end of the day, this is going to be something, we're all in this together. We're all in this together, and we need to be aware of not only the people that are coming in from outside that are trying to exert their foreign culture and overtake us and colonize us, because that's what this is. This is colonization. As I said, it's fine when they do it. It's fine when other people from outside do it. It's never okay when we do it. That's what we've been taught. Every time the British went, for example, and colonized somewhere, so that's evil, that's disgusting, they did all these horrendous things, the locals never wanted it. You know, even going back as far as like Columbus, he was made out to be this evil figure. When, you look at some of the things that are coming out about the history of the areas of the world that he went to, the temples, the child sacrifice and all of that stuff. And then you think, maybe Columbus had a little bit of a point. Maybe Columbus and those guys had a little bit of a point for, bringing Christianity. And maybe that bringing of Christianity was actually a good thing. But at the end of the day, this is not going to stop unless we make it stop. I'm relieved to see the younger generation are waking up to this, because it's going to be them that are going to be forced in many instances. You now see many outright admissions that civil war is on the horizon. In many instances, I don't think it's actually a civil war is very accurate, because civil war implies that you're going to war against, your own people within your own nation. It's not technically just a war within a nation, not a war between two separate nations. But you think about it, a lot of the people that are going to be fighting on one side are just from a completely foreign place to us. So can it really be called a civil conflict? It's a foreign conflict within the borders of the UK. It's going to be. So it's a weird kind of civil war. It's not like in the American Civil War, for example, or the Civil War we had long ago, where it was like Englishman versus Englishman. No, it's now going to be like Englishman potentially versus another Englishman who's been indoctrinated onto the other side. But then you're also going to have a bunch of other foreign ethnic minority groups and other foreign religious groups. So it's weird. It's going to be very, very weird, but it's very, very concerning. But it's going to be the young men that are going to be forced to lay down their lives for it. And it's very good to see that they are now, at least maybe while we still have a little bit of time, that they're waking up to it. At the very least, they're waking up to it. If not, they're awake and they're angry. They're awake and they're angry, and they have every right to be, and they should be, because they've had their livelihoods, their country, and their heritage stolen from them. And in many instances, their religion, which gave them that hope and peace and purpose as well, because it was outright lied about. So we'll wait to see what happens in Abergavenny, but this is very, very concerning. You should be very, very concerned about this. The fact that 30 years, this is devolution. This is devolution. And make no mistake, these people want to make it, the people that we have in government want to make it even worse. They want to make it even worse. So, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see here now what the Welsh government's priorities are. So you're looking at this like, again, how is it that, again, going back to the point as well that I mentioned, I know I've lost my train of thought a little bit here, ladies and gentlemen, but this is why I want to get into the frame of mind why I can't stand people when they say, oh, well, it's not here, it's not happening here right now. I don't care what's going on in England. I don't care what's going on in London. I don't care what's going on in all these places. I'm like, this is why you should. This is why you should. Because it didn't take long for all of those areas to get conquered, colonized, and taken over, and then where are they going to go next? Think about it. Between us and England, even between us and Scotland, it is completely landlocked. All of these nations, we might think of them as separate nations, and if a thing's happening in Scotland, it doesn't affect the other nations of the UK or the other nations of GB. It absolutely does, because we are landlocked to each other, and we don't have strict border controls. In fact, in many instances, like between Ireland and Northern Ireland, we've seen how that has gone. We've seen how that has gone, haven't we? We made the deliberate decision that we didn't want those. So think about it. People who are coming in with this ideology from outside that they want to colonize, they want to do all of these awful things to us because they see us as second class. All they got to do is cross the bloody Severn Bridge and they're right in your home territory. It's not like, because they're 400 miles away or something like that. They could do that in half a day. Not even half a day with modern travel. Think about it. Say, for example, there was a small boat that landed right up the top of Scotland. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen. They'll come into Dover and they'll have the border force, or known as the immigrant taxi service, bring them in. So you have all this, right? Even if they were to come in at the top tip of Scotland, these foreigners were to come in at the top tip of Scotland, they could be in Cardiff in a matter of hours. Potentially. That should worry you. That should worry you. There'll be no border checks. There'll be no police checks. There'll be nothing for them along the way. Next thing you know, a bunch of them are coming to your town and, you end up with a mosque. You end up with an Islamic cultural centre. And then you end up with Sharia law. And then you'll end up with, sadly, a lot more statistics to add to the rape gang inquiry. Can we please start admitting reality no matter how much it makes us uncomfortable now, ladies and gentlemen? Because it's getting real. So like I said, the Welsh government is more focused on blocking moves to deport illegal migrants rather than actually supporting moves to deport them, which would be the responsible thing to do. And one thing I've realised more and more and more at the moment is that remigration is going to be the peaceful solution. The government's illegal migration bill was designed to deport illegal immigrants. Shockingly, the Senedd voted against granting legislative consent for the bill. To see what Senedd members have to say, ladies and gentlemen, I have this clip for you.
The LCM on the illegal migration bill. The Minister for Social Justice to move the motion, Jane Hutt.
Fucking social justice.
I move the motion and recommend that members withhold their consent for this bill. So the UK government's illegal migration bill will fundamentally undermine our nation of sanctuary vision, which...
Good. It should do. It should do, because the nation of sanctuary vision is the most damaging vision for Wales that any government has ever had recently, at least in my opinion, that I've seen. It's one of the most damaging initiatives that's ever been put in place. But obviously then that's why they complain, because it gets in the way of their agenda.
Which the Senedd has endorsed, and the Welsh Government's ambition for Wales to be a nation of sanctuary would also be put in jeopardy as a result.
Good.
A majority of the committee recommends that the Senedd should withhold legislative consent, with one member disagreeing.
Today, once again, I find myself speaking during a debate about another LCM about the treatment of age-disputed asylum seekers. Just like February last year, we have concluded...
Yeah, remember all those... remember people saying that a lot of these asylum seekers are coming over saying they were like 15, 16 and they're like in their early 20s. Yeah, age disputed, because we told that, it's people fleeing war. It's people fleeing war and all of this stuff. Well, I'm like, well, why are they all pretty much military-age men? Why are they all pretty much military-age men is my question. And that's always been my question. There is one funny point to this part of the story, though, which I'm going to show you now, ladies and gentlemen. This wasn't something I was going to bring up in this episode today, but one thing I did want to say is in Italy recently, there was an instance, however, where it was nice to see finally that some of these so-called asylum seekers, and you'll see now in a minute when I say stuff like this, my job ended up getting rid of me. It was nice to see some of them actually bringing their wives over and making sure that they were safe. So we have footage of that for you, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're not watching but listening, ladies and gentlemen, this is me fancying myself for something of a little bit of a comedian. So this was in Lampedusa in Italy, and footage emerged of an asylum seeker coming over, and I believe this is the Coast Guard, the Italian Coast Guard, that brought them in. And what they're doing now is, ladies and gentlemen, you can hear that bleating in the background. They're bringing their sheep. They're bringing their sheep. So-called asylum seekers who we need to make Wales a nation of sanctuary for. They're bringing their sheep. Now, there's a joke in there, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not sure why, again, I deliberately used the term wife to describe this situation, well, you have a little bit of learning to do. You have a little bit of learning on the comedic aspects of the customs. Not so comedic, actually, for the animals, but the comedic customs that some of these nations have in place. But anyway, let's get back to the video we were looking at.
That the Senedd consent is required for certain clauses in the bill. And just like February last year, we have recommended that the Senedd does not grant its consent.
We now turn to...
Every single time, what they mean when they don't grant consent, they're saying the Senedd should operate in opposition to the best interests of the Welsh people. That's what they mean, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you need to take away from that.
The subject of this LCM, which must surely rank as one of the vilest pieces of legislation that has come before us. This bill is designed to attack the rights of refugees and asylum seekers. My party is
and rejecting it attacks the rights and sovereignty of the Welsh people. But obviously Nigel Farage came out and gave you the definition of the Welsh people recently, didn't he? Not directly related to this, but the left have got to be clapping their hands with glee at what Nigel Farage said a Welsh person was recently. Do you know what he said a Welsh person was, ladies and gentlemen? It's just somebody that's been in the country for about 5 to 10 years and has paid taxes. That's what a Welsh person is, because apparently the Welsh are just a community. That's the term that Nigel Farage used to describe the people of this sovereign nation. The people of this sovereign nation that have roots going back in this land potentially tens of thousands of years. Some of them. You could trace their genetic history back far enough. And somebody who comes into the country by any means could be one of these illegal aliens that come across the channel from another safe country, namely France, come into the country and they spend 5 years working, putting in, contributing to the slave class that our politicians have imported because they can pay them dirt cheap wages and ruin the job prospects for all other Welshmen, Welsh women as well. And that makes them on par. That makes them the same, indistinguishable, because it's just a community. And you wonder why Reform are tanking their support so much at the moment. Because a lot of them will show their support for other peoples to enforce their borders, to exercise their own self-determination as people and as a nation. A lot of them vocal in their support for Israel and the Israeli people, for example, which I don't have no problem with. I have no problem with, I think that the Israelis having control of... Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very growly dog in the background. But I think the Israelis having control of that plot of land, the Holy Land, as opposed to it being a predominantly, again, another aspect of the Muslim Caliphate, I think is a very good thing for the most part. I don't think we'd see, for example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre still standing without them being there. Does a lot in a way, whether you agree with it or not, of the patience that they've had in many ways of not destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque and building the Third Temple, which I know is something that a lot of them want to do. But again, a lot of the things that are said about them, I take with quite a lot of quite a lot of scrutiny, especially with what's been happening at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. So you've been aware that Israel is attacking Iran at the moment. Seem to be doing it in quite a precise way, but all I said about the issue was I just hope they know what they're doing. I hope they know what they're doing, because all of these foreign conflicts, I don't believe we should have any kind of active role in them at the moment, purely because we have so many problems going on at home. Personally, from my personal standpoint, even knowing a little bit about the history. So again, I looked up something recently known as the Sergeant's Affair, which was a horrible thing that happened at the hand of Israeli right-wing groups back when I believe it was still British Mandate Palestine. You had the, King David Hotel incident. All of these things go back through history. They obviously supported Argentina during the Falklands, so there's been a very checkered history between our two nations, and I fully understand that. But from the standpoint of preventing that area of land in particular from becoming just another aspect of the Muslim caliphate that seems to be growing and growing and growing, I think is still, on the whole, a very good thing. And, you know, just with foreign conflicts at the moment, I would love to, you know, support them in some ways, you know, maybe just offering, you know, quite literally just words of support or whatever. That's pretty much the only thing I can think to offer at the moment. It's quite weak, I know. But that's because we have so many problems at home. That's because we have so many problems at home, and because of how weak we are. But again, I'd love to hear people's counter arguments on that point. I'm open to being convinced at anything. I know a lot of people say that you know, Israel is evil and Israel causes all the problems and stuff like that. In that one area where you have so many Muslim countries in particular trying to assassinate and strangle this one predominantly Jewish state, because it's not 100% homogeneously Jewish. You do have obviously a 20% Arab Muslim population, and you have Arab representation in the Israeli Knesset. So again, when people say that Israel is the number one problem in the Middle East, I am just immediately skeptical towards that, because you need to look at the broader geopolitical landscape, in my opinion. But I'm open to being convinced. I'm always open to being convinced. The only thing, as I do preface people to say, is that what would you do? What would you do then if you were to, say, get rid of the state of Israel and make it what would predominantly then, or what you think it would be, as a Arab state? What would you then do with obviously all the Jews that live there, all the ethnic Jews that live there? When, for example, we've seen that in Europe right now, obviously they're not safe. They're not safe, for example. So really, you can think of them as being a lot like us in some ways. They really have nowhere else to go, just like we have nowhere else to go. This is our land. This is our land that's being taken over, and our people that are being subjugated. We have nowhere else to go. We have no other country that we can flee to. A lot of people either don't have the financial means, or, again, they don't have heritage or citizenship or anywhere else. So they have nowhere else to go. So we have to fight. In that instance, we do have a commonality there. So again, I just love to hear people's thoughts on that. But again, I know that was a massive tangent. But again, all the Welsh government is doing here is always acting in opposition to the best interests of the Welsh people, because they are a foreign government acting on foreign interests.
Against the inhumane, illegal migration bill that has been proposed by Westminster, and have fought it at every level of government. It comes as no surprise that we will not be voting in favour of the LCM bill that has been discussed in the Senedd regarding the illegal migration bill.
Close the vote. In favour, 15, no.
Oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I cut it off a little bit early before the verdict came in. I do apologise.
Migration bill.
Close the vote. In favour, 15, no abstentions, 38 against, and therefore the motion is not agreed. That concludes voting for today. Thank you all.
That should tell you, ladies and gentlemen, everything you need to know about your elected officials and about your government. They're doing more to keep illegal foreign invaders in the country than to do the best thing and to act in the best interest of the Welsh people. If they're acting on the best interest of the Welsh people, they wouldn't be so in bed with globalist entities like the EU, World Economic Forum, United Nations, all of these other institutions, right? They wouldn't be. That's where their interest lies. That's where their bread is buttered. These people know where their bread is buttered. These people know where their bread is buttered. And they don't care, because they're going to be getting more money than most of us will ever be seeing in our lifetime. Especially as becoming more and more of a serf class every single day. And then you have Dripford, Mark Dripford. His real name, for example, his real name, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who this person is, former First Minister of Wales, Mark Dripford, condemned Nation of Sanctuary warnings. He said that Nation of Sanctuary warnings and calling the Nation of Sanctuary ambition irresponsible beggars belief. I'm going to play you this video, ladies and gentlemen, because this video is a fantastic illustration of the incompetence and the the ideological bent of our elected officials. Because the person, whilst Mark Drakeford is saying this in the Senedd, I'm not sure exactly when he's saying this from, I don't know if he was First Minister at the time, is saying this, and in the backdrop you have footage of the fiery but mostly peaceful LA riots that happened recently, the immigrant riots, as many of them are calling them now. And in many instances, rightfully so, because they're flying foreign flags, they're flying Mexican flags and saying, we love Mexico so much, right? We love Mexico so much that we're going to try and take California from you and make it Mexican again, which in many instances should just be viewed as an act of war. Especially when the Mexican president, I've forgotten her bloody name, Scheinbaum, something like that, came out and said that she endorsed the idea and said that people should do it more. So again, I think it might be time for Mexico to potentially become the 52nd state after Ottawa. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is Drippy Dripford talking about the warnings of the Nation of Sanctuary plan, begging belief or beggars belief, whilst California, I believe it is, burns behind him.
To describe Wales's ambition to be a nation of sanctuary as irresponsible simply beggars belief. I'm shocked to hear it even from him, and he has no knowledge whatsoever of where people who will be housed at this camp are coming from. None of us do.
He had an important point at the end, though. So it doesn't beg a belief. Doesn't beg a belief at all, because as we've seen, we now have a 30-year lease for a mosque and a cultural centre in Abergavenny, a quaint Welsh former mining town, pretty much. So sooner or later, it's going to be coming to every single little Welsh town that we have, make no mistake about it. And I hope the people in Abergavenny are ready for those 5 a.m. morning calls, calls to prayer and stuff like that from the loudspeakers. I hope they're ready for it. I hope they're ready for that. But literally, ladies and gentlemen, this video is great because it shows you the complete disconnect between reality and our political class, because you have California burning behind us, man, police cars burning, most fiery but mostly peaceful, as we say, and letting in more people with foreign interest from foreign places is just going to be what? All peaceful? We're going to get around and sing Kumbaya? Not going to happen. It's absolutely not going to happen. But he hit on an important point at the end. He says he has no knowledge whatsoever of where people will be housed at this camp are coming from. Yes, Dripford, that is the problem. That is the problem. But in many instances, we actually do know. We know they're coming from predominantly Middle Eastern and Indian countries and stuff like that, from that area of the world, from the other side of the world. And they're not just, coming here for chance at a better life. No, they're coming here to bring their shitty cultures with them a lot of the time and to supplant our culture with theirs. That is colonization. But you can't say that. You might be deemed as racist. Oh, well, so be it. And it tells you a lot, ladies and gentlemen, where the Welsh government's priorities are when they funded a theatre offering discounted tickets to asylum seekers. So asylum seekers, surely, if they're fleeing war, if they're fleeing persecution and they have nothing at all, why is the priority being able to get them cheaper tickets to see the cinema? To see films in the cinema, to see, Avengers Secret War, whatever it is, Secret Invasion, whatever it is. They want to go see the Barbie movie and they got to get discounted tickets because they can't afford it. Why does the Welsh taxpayer have to foot that bill? But not only that, why is that the priority? Surely you think when you're fleeing from your home in order to not be killed or some other kind of persecution, some other kind of torture, surely the first thing on your mind is, oh, fuck, I'm not going to be able to afford to see the first Barbie movie or the new Barbie movie or whatever it is, right? But no, Chapter Art Centre in Cardiff, no surprising, it's an art centre in a big city in, liberal Cardiffistan. That's another thing I got sacked for, by the way. I was using that term, but it was Londonistan. Receives plenty of taxpayers' cash, and it appears to be using it to fund discounts for asylum seekers. On its website, discounted tickets are offered for many productions at a fee well below the standard rate. So last year, this is a little bit of interesting information for you, ladies and gentlemen, the Chapter Art Centre got £33,550.39 from the Welsh Government directly. On top of this, it received $60,000 from the Welsh Government-funded Arts Council of Wales as part of its, quote, Perspectives Fund. According to the Arts Council, Perspectives, the purpose of it is to develop narratives and ways of working creatively together that provide a balanced, authentic, and, there it is, decolonised history of Wales and a reflection of Wales today. So to provide a wrongful view of history and to provide a reflection of the shitty country that Wales is today. That is the whole point. That is the whole point. To pride the shitty country that Wales has become and to completely remove, distort, and wrongfully retell every aspect of its history that is deemed as troubling. Sooner or later, ladies and gentlemen, it will be illegal or it will be frowned upon. It will be deemed racist, intolerant to celebrate St. David's Day. Can promise you that. If this continues. Because that's where the logical conclusion is going to go. Christianity has already been declared war on. And part of history from Wales, a big part of history, is the miracles that allegedly took place that made David a colonized, fuck's sake, I get confused with my words all the time. This is what happens when I don't have my caffeine, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when I don't have my caffeine. I haven't had my caffeine today. So I'm a little bit behind the curve and I'm a little bit jittery. Anyway. Saint David, very important figure in Welsh history, who brought the gospel to Wales and is canonized, or not colonized, canonized as a saint. Now, he was around about 1,500 years ago. So not only Christianity under attack, not only was David very likely, given his Welsh heritage, believe, if I'm not mistaken, let me just double check this, I believe he was born in Llandudno. Was he born in Llandudno? Let me see. Oh, no, sorry, he was born in Pembrokeshire. My apologies, I keep getting them confused. Pembrokeshire, and then that's where the town of St. David's gets its name from, by the way, because that's where he died, and we celebrate his feast on March the 1st, as you know. Sooner or later, David, given his genetic heritage, being native to this land, was very likely very light-skinned gentleman, and he brought the religion that you're not allowed to talk about to Wales. How long is it going to be as part of this decolonization and telling a balanced, authentic, decolonized history as a reflection of Wales today is going to be frowned upon and potentially illegal to celebrate St. David's Day? I hope we get a crusade before that point. But at the very least, I hope we get a crusade by that point. We've already seen it in England as well, for example. Their patron saint, St. George. People who want to go out and celebrate St. George's Day, they get all manner of harassment from the police. You know, you have nothing for when there's, Mubarak, the Eid Mubarak stuff, whatever it is. But then you get some people that want to go out and celebrate St. George's Day. You get police horses. You get them being harassed by police horses, all the rest of it. You get people in riot gear. It's truly disgusting. When you get riots in Hare Hills, or when you get, a killer stabbing a bunch of kids up in Southport, you don't get any of that, do you? We've explained the Welsh Government's ideological spending before. It's central to our octopus analogy, as well as handing out cash to organisations directly. And the octopus analogy shows that all of this stuff, the Arts Council, which is funding the anti-racist stuff, the Welsh Race Council, Sustrans, all of the trans stuff. I can't remember the exact group name off the top of my head right now, but all of these groups, charities and NGOs, they're all funded by the Welsh government. And who funds the Welsh government? The Welsh taxpayers. So you are quite literally subsidizing your own destruction, often not only from the evilness and the working on foreign interests of our politicians, but because of your political apathy and you won't take into account over it. Oftentimes because they've chosen to keep you deliberately ignorant of what's going on via school indoctrination and all the rest of it. But now you've heard this. You've heard me say this if you've made it this far. You need to wake up. You need to wake up, and we need to start taking our politicians to account. We need to start taking our politicians to account before they actually start trying to campaign to kill us and kill our entire next generation, which we'll be getting onto in a moment. But this is where the ideological bent of the Welsh government has taken us to, ladies and gentlemen. So, for example, you have this. This is a screenshot of one of the tickets from the website. You have the chapter, which I'm assuming is the name of the Arts Council or the website. Asylum seekers, £10. Now, it doesn't give the reference, I don't believe, as to what the normal ticket price is. But you can presume it's probably going to be a fair bit more expensive. Probably at least, I'd say probably around double. Because I think it's a theatre production that we're talking about, actually. So again, maybe my Barbie comparison wasn't exactly the apt comparison. But it's truly, truly disgusting, the fact that this is what we are choosing to. We're not choosing to spend our money on this, but this is what our elected, quote unquote, elected representatives are choosing to spend our hard-earned serfdom class money on. So I'm just going to try and refocus my camera a minute, ladies and gentlemen. There we are. It's better. I think I'm refocused. But if you wonder how things get so bad, ladies and gentlemen, you need only look at the state of how things go when we're in the Senedd. So this is actually a little bit of infighting that is going on, seemingly on the left at the moment. And I love the comment that somebody put on this one. Turtleneck is an angry little lefty, isn't he? Vile man. I believe talking about Mark Dripford. We wonder why seemingly nothing seems to get done, despite the fact that these people are being paid upwards of £70,000 a year as a bare minimum. You just got to listen to this. Like a bunch of over-promoted, third-rate parish councillors arguing over who's got the best and most important job. This is Mark Dripford going off on, I haven't seen this yet, but I've heard that it's quite an interesting rant at his Plaid Cymru counterpart, Mr. Iorwerth, which I think is going to be quite interesting to watch, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's be clear. I know you don't like good news. Let's make sure. I am telling you. I'm the finance minister. Would you like to listen to me? Because I can tell you.
There'll be no discussion.
Let's be clear.
We're a fucking joke.
Let's make sure. I am telling you. I'm the finance minister. Would you like to listen to me?
We're a fucking joke. This is where we are as a country. This is where we are. So Mr. Dripford, who used to be the leader of this country, he's now the finance minister. I'm the finance minister. I'm telling you, would you like to listen to me? And it just appears that the Plaid Cymru leader is just kind of laughing at him, and that's really the only thing you can do. But this is where we are. This is where we are with it now. This is the caliber of person. This is the caliber of representative. This is the caliber of representative that we have in the Welsh government. This man used to be the leader of the country. At the very top. You know, our Donald Trump, basically. I know you have the Prime Minister of the UK, I know that, but that's basically our Donald Trump. It could never. And it just gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. When you look at some of the other people that we have in the Welsh Senedd, for example, it just gets worse. So I mentioned before that what appears to be some good news. There appears to be some good news on this front at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, with regards to this bill. So at the moment, well, not necessarily with this one, sorry, but on another one. So I mentioned before that very pro-death culture being introduced and has been slowly growing in the UK, predominantly due to the atheistic secularism that we have taken on board hook, line and sinker. Kim Leadbeater in the assisted suicide debate has suffered her first defeat, thank God. So, likely due to her willingness, as I've covered before, to allow doctors to raise assisted suicide with children, with under 18s, the bill was actually, at this point, I'm not sure if this was a parliamentary debate or whatever it was, but either way, currently it stands that it was voted down, I believe, 259 to 216. So I'm not sure where it is. I do believe this is at a stage now where she can go and make amendments to it and try and get it pushed through again. But she really is the face of evil, but it's good to see that so many people have actually stood up against this. Even people who were more in principle as before, as I said before, were like, oh, I want to not see my elderly relative suffer and all this stuff. No, it's the lack of safeguards that they wanted to put in place, that they wanted to kill your 16-year-old if she said that she was suicidal or he was suicidal or all of these things, right? Thank God that so far it's been voted down, I believe, and I think it might have been just the amendment to stop doctors raising assisted suicide with children did get passed. So it's just that particular amendment that got passed, I believe. So at least we know now that doctors, at least according to the law, it seems, will not be able to talk about assisted suicide with children under the age of 18. That's very reassuring at the very least, but you know, you can make the argument they shouldn't be talking about it with anybody. But again, pro-death culture. So there's an MP by the name of Tonia Antoniazzi, who's, again, fitting last part of that surname, isn't it? Seeking to introduce abortion up to birth next week, and says she's comfortable with women being able to abort a viable baby at 37 weeks without committing an offence, which that should make your stomach turn, ladies and gentlemen. That is very deep into the third trimester. I want to see if I can find the image that was shared. I will see if I can find it in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. But this is very, it will be kind of disturbing viewing. So I can't seem to find it for some reason. Maybe it got taken down. I don't know. That's a bit weird. Give me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, sadly I can't find the image that I was referring to, ladies and gentlemen. It was I believe it was an image of an abortion, which I shared. It was at 37 weeks. And again, it's just, you know, there's no way. Even people, for example, I've got the quote here from Sharon Davis, I believe, whom I would disagree with on this point, the way that she has phrased it, for example. I would heavily disagree with it because I disagree with the notion that she's posing. I don't believe it's true. So, for example, Sharon Davis, MBE, Olympic medalist, 13 times Olympics. She's a swimmer, or was a swimmer at the very least. And she put out this post about this, which even many people who are on her side of the aisle agree with and take true problems with what's coming up now, even though it kind of really doesn't make sense. So she says, I'm pro-choice regarding abortion. It's a woman's body, but I'm not pro-choice at 37 weeks. That's no longer an abortion. So it's an incongruent statement. Sadly, the problem is it's an incongruent statement, even if I agree with her in the sense that an abortion at 37 weeks is wrong. The only way for it to make sense, though, is that you believe if all abortion, no matter what, is wrong. Okay? That's the only point which you can eventually arrive at that is moral and consistent. Because at every single point of human development, it is a human life. It is a human life because it's a genetically distinct organism that no matter how small it is and no matter of its location is going through processes like cell division and growth that are going to eventually grow into outside of the womb, fully realized human. But at every single point of the pregnancy, from the moment of conception, it is a genetically distinct organism growing with support from the mother. And that means that it's not your body, but if it is just a woman's body and it's her choice, then really there's no logical reason for pro-choicers to oppose abortion up until birth, because at that point it's apparently still their body. You can argue it's no longer an abortion, but abortion at the end of the day is murder. So of course it is. That's the problem that these pro-choicers are facing now. Even if I agree with the sentiment that they're trying to put forth, it's just that their argument does not make sense at its foundations. It's a contradiction. It's a contradiction because what's the difference? For example, if it's a human life, as I said, it's a distinct organism and it's a human life. What's the difference with it being at 22 weeks? What's the difference with it being at 6 weeks? If you argue that it's a human life and it's growing, A, it's distinct from you, and B, obviously, it's life. So that ending that life would be murder. So what would be the difference if, for example, certain organs hadn't grown yet or anything like that? If certain physiological functions or senses hadn't been realized yet? That really is nebulous stuff. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they can feel pain or anything like that. It's a human life at the end of the day, which you're choosing to end. So really, that's the thing. Pro-choicers really, if the conclusion of their position is to be taken, then they really have no logical reason to oppose this, or even no moral reason to oppose this, other than it just makes them feel uncomfortable, other than it makes them feel icky. And really, that's not exactly a very strong argument, because they're showing that they don't actually take problem with the ending of the life part, because you go back to an arbitrary point that they've decided, and they decide that, oh, okay, well, it's okay to kill it before that point, for whatever reason. So it's not the actual ending of human life that they have a problem with. It's that, at this point, for whatever reason, because it looks a lot more like a human than it otherwise would at, say, 6 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it might be, that makes them a little bit more uncomfortable, because the reality of what they're doing is a lot harder to ignore. That's why they don't like it. But this is, on Times Radio, I believe it's Tonia Antoniazzi, saying she's comfortable with women being able to abort a viable baby at 37 weeks without committing an offence. Worse, over 100 MPs support her amendment. So this is from the Times Radio now, ladies and gentlemen.
Any woman could end a pregnancy at any time, 35 weeks, 36 weeks, 37 weeks, without committing an offence. And are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I am.
Some people would say, though, 37, late on in pregnancy, it's a baby. It's a baby. It's a fully grown baby. It's a baby that would survive outside the womb. And actually, it's not for necessarily. There'll be some circumstances where a woman shouldn't be criminalised because of extenuating circumstances, as you say.
Problem is, you very easily make the argument as well, ladies and gentlemen, that the baby could actually not survive out the womb still without the aid of its mother, or without the aid, say, of healthcare professionals giving it food and stuff like that and making sure that it's cared for. So what actually does viability mean? It's still reliant on your mother, either way, or your parental figure.
But actually, the act of ending that life cannot be removed entirely from the justice system.
And that woman would be in the system, known to GPs, doctors, midwives, and be in a situation where they would have that help and support, and they need to have that help and support. You're just
just me that the people that support this, just look at this, ladies and gentlemen. This is not me trying to take a dig at anybody's appearance. I'm not the most good looking guy, don't get me wrong. But there are certain qualities with people that want to espouse this evil that just become manifest. They just become manifest. Which you see the MPs that carry themselves in a different way, carry themselves in a more moral way, it comes across literally oftentimes in the way that they look, in the way that they carry themselves and their general outlook. This person is somebody that's deeply not happy, very likely because they've got all these demons plaguing them from the inside that makes them think that murdering babies is okay. They need to deal with that before they tell people, oh, go and murder your babies, or it's going to be okay to murder your babies and all stuff like that.
Basically wanting to criminalise a woman. And you're also making the assumption there, which I find quite... and
they laugh about it.
Difficult, because you're making the assumption that a woman wants to make this, to actually kill her child. And that's
but you're making
not
this...
the case.
But you're... No, but you're...
That's what an abortion is. That's what an abortion is. It's the decision to kill a child. So at the end of the day, no matter how you want to slice it, the people wanting to make the decision, at the end of the day, you have many examples of people that have had heinous things happen to them that have resulted in pregnancy, rape and incest and all of that stuff, mainly regarding rape in this instance. So it's a common one people like to go to. And that they've shown tremendous moral courage, and they've shown tremendous strength of character, and they've acknowledged that the baby does not have to die for what happened to them. So people can make that choice, ultimately. People can make that choice. People can make the decision, no matter how much it's going to potentially set them back, if you will. You know? Oftentimes, a lot of people many people whom I know, for example, have had heinous things happen to them, and they've often said the kid's been the best thing that's come from that. The kid's been one of the best things that's ever happened to them. And they didn't hold the child accountable for the sins of the father. That takes tremendous courage, and that takes tremendous strength of character. And it's a tremendously virtuous and morally good thing to do. So people can make that choice, and it is a choice that people make. And it's getting harder and harder to see how there shouldn't be consequences for that. It's getting harder and harder to see. Again, you have issues around informed consent and all things like that. Fully grant that. But, you know, when the informed consent is given, it's very hard to not hold. At the end of the day, you're just making the conscious choice not to hold people accountable for one of the worst evils that could ever be committed.
Woman wants to do that.
But Tonia, you're making the assumption that they don't, but some women might do. I mean, are you saying that no woman could have no?
Sorry, and if they do, they need help and support.
But hang on, the assumption that you're making is that no woman could ever.
They need help and support. Yeah, they need help and support not to kill the child. They need help and support not to kill the child. Absolutely.
Ever have criminal intent to the baby growing inside them. No woman should be punished for killing a life that's about to be born and would be sustainable.
So yeah, that's where we are. That's where we are with that. Solution to all the problems, just kill it away. Just kill it away. But that's what you get, for example, in a society that has completely detached all notion of sanctity of human life. That's completely got rid of any kind of objective moral foundation. Because we decided that not only did we not want it, but we thought that we could do it better. That we didn't need God, for example, to tell us what morality is. But then we start killing babies. Again, tale as old as time, quite literally. Tale as old as time. Without that as well, for example, without those things like moral foundations and all of those things, ladies and gentlemen, you end up with 84,000, nearly £85,000 being spent at Newcastle University, who, by the way, just instituted a policy where I believe on their campus-run food stations, on their campus-run restaurants and all things like that, food now will be mandatory halal compliant. So even people now that are maybe of different religious backgrounds that would, be going against their faith by eating halal meat and stuff like that, because it's part of a religious sacrament in another faith, they're now being forced to comply with that. So I said to you that this is state religion, ladies and gentlemen. I'm making no mistake about it. But you also have £85,000 at Newcastle University for School of Arts and Cultures. Again, these lovely theatre students, ladies and gentlemen, screwing everything over for the rest of us, combating witchcraft-related violence through song. I'm not joking about this, ladies and gentlemen. This was something that has been funded currently. It's being funded right now at Newcastle University until April 26, as in 2026, next year, combating witchcraft-related violence through song. Arts in Action introduced arts-based interventions to combat gender-based, you always need the buzz terms in there, the intersectional buzz terms, gender-based violence in Amadzitzi chiefdom, 9 rural villages in Eastern Cape, South Africa. In the early project, we unexpectedly identified a covert yet major gender-based violence threat, witchcraft-related violence, with elderly women the frequent targets. Physical features common to aging, wrinkled skin, thinning hair, missing teeth when associated with women are routinely equated with being a witch, quote-unquote. If accused, these women are pushed into social isolation, maybe beaten, maimed, raped, or murdered. Now, those things at the end, they're awful. Ain't no mistake about it. Those things at the end, they're awful. They should not be doing that, obviously. But Newcastle taxpayers are now being forced to the tune of £84,838, ladies and gentlemen, to combat witchcraft-related violence through song. And this indoctrination runs deep. Ladies and gentlemen. So I mentioned that was at Newcastle University. You have the most prestigious sixth form in England, for example, or even in the UK, King's College London Mathematics School. So King's College London Mathematics School, as James Essers recently pointed out, it's a taxpayer-funded state school, is extremely high-performing and well-regarded, having been previously ranked the best sixth form in the country. However, he was recently contacted by two whistleblowers, one a former student and another a parent, and they have said that the entire modus operandi of the school is to brainwash and suppress free speech, quote-unquote. So, for example, the things that they have been doing in King's College London Mathematics School, students are expected to sign up to a program of learning which encourages indoctrination and discourages free thought. Here's a list of house rules that students are asked to agree to as part of their mandatory personal development teaching. Mandatory, ladies and gentlemen. So this isn't a choice. This is also a case in Welsh college campuses, for example, where a lot of the LGBT anti-racist education, the indoctrination stuff, is being made mandatory. And if students don't want to go along with it, they are subjected to very, very bad treatment. Let's just say that. Not necessarily like threatened or anything like that, but very quickly even students are being told that what legal action in many ways they will face, and how their reputations and stuff like that will be destroyed. Kids as young as like 16, 17 are being forced into this through fear in Welsh education campuses. It includes requirements to, quote, stay sensitive, avoid academization, and accept that some things are valid that are not rational. Now, unless you're talking about irrational numbers, don't see any reason that kids here should be put through this mandatory personal development teaching that things are valid and not rational. According to the student whistleblower, this agreement was used to police speech in the classroom and shut down arguments against ideologies being pushed by teachers. No surprise there. Bizarrely, there is also a mandatory agreement to, quote, love Lady Fluffy Von McFluffy. When I asked the former student what this meant, he told me this refers to a stuffed animal toy present in the classroom. This is a school for teenagers on the cusp of adulthood. So I'm going to read you now, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to put this up a little bit bigger on the screen for you, and you'll be able to read the agreement that students at this school are forced to adhere to. It says, I agree to be present, leave if I need to, unless it's for unapproved reasons such as going against the orthodoxy. Stay sensitive, avoid academization. Remember, there is never a need to share personal stories. Love Lady Fluffy Von McFluffy. Accept that some things are valid that are not rational. Be supportive of others. This is the main purpose of these lessons. Not to make the best math students or anything like that, I'm assuming. No. And bring other points of view into my mind. Unless, of course, you've already accepted the political orthodoxy, in which then you are required to reject. You are required to reject all other points of view. They're also big on pushing critical race theory. So even though it's reported that upwards of 90% of the students at the school are non-white, a culture of white bashing and fixation upon skin colour appears to run throughout the school across all subjects. One of the clearest forms of this is stated in the intention of the school to make maths quote-unquote anti-racist. In a maths lesson plan, students are told, quote, who gets credit for doing and developing mathematics and who is seen as part of the mathematical community is generally viewed as white. Again, whiteness is a kind of private property here, ladies and gentlemen, to be appropriated and to be redistributed. It's kind of a social private property. Again, that's why this is race Marxism. School mathematics curricula emphasizing terms like Pythagorean theorem and pi perpetuate the perception that mathematics was largely developed by Greeks and other Europeans. So using terms like Pythagorean theorem and pi may perpetuate the truth. They have a problem with the truth, these people, because it was Greeks and other Europeans that mainly came up with the mathematical system that we use today. That's why it's called the Pythagorean theorem. It's named after Pythagoras. That's why it's called Euclidean geometry. You know, all of these things. That's why it's called Newton's laws of motion. That is just facts. It's just history. But of course, they need to push the narrative that maths was innovated in Africa. So, of course, you can't have Aristotle, well, not Aristotle, but like Archimedes, and what was the guy's name that for the time when they thought the sun was a lot closer than it actually was, actually estimated the circumference of the sun with really, what was his name? I've forgotten his name. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It ends in Innes. I've forgotten his name. It's like Aristides or something. Is it Aristides? I think that's what his name is. It's something like that. But again, you can't have the truth being known because that's racist, ladies and gentlemen. So it's got to be called the, Unga Bunga theorem, Unga Bungan theorem, or, or things like that. You can't have E as the constant for rate of change. You got to have, some other kind of African letter or whatever, some Zulu sound. Perhaps more importantly, mathematics operates with unearned privilege in society, just like whiteness. That's how deep that goes, in that last statement. Now, let me bring this up for you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to make this bigger for you so you can see it. I'm not joking when we say this. This is what these students are given as part of their lesson plans in a maths school. So it says here, you can see it in the middle of the document if you're looking at it now. Who gets credit for doing and developing mathematics and who is seen as part of the mathematical community is generally viewed as white. And again, in order to make it to remove this from just the racial component and make it to something different, like it's this monolithic, entity, they capitalize it. They capitalize the W in white. Almost like to make it this entity which you got to fight against, all right? School mathematics curricula emphasizing terms like Pythagorean theorem and pi perpetuate the perception that mathematics was largely developed by Greeks and other Europeans. So again, it perpetuates the truth, or it tells the truth, and you can't have that in an anti-race because anti-racism goes directly against the truth of history. It goes directly against it. So, for example, again, that's why I want to get rid of algebra as well, because it was, I believe it was the... I don't know if it was the ancient Greeks, because the ancient Greeks, the way they done math, as far as I know, was a lot different to the way we do it now. They done using edges and stuff like that. They didn't actually use algebraic notation like we do now. I can't remember when exactly that came in. It might have been around the time of the Renaissance. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't have that good knowledge of history. But they didn't actually use the algebraic notation. So again, it's more the European element there, I think. Attempts to shoehorn social justice into mathematics curricula perhaps say more about the political leanings of the teacher more than anything else. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, this is this is in the most prestigious sixth form in the UK. This is in the most prestigious sixth form in the UK. Obviously, everything has to be about race. So, for example, it was drilled into us all the way through school as well. That Barack Obama, for example, the first black president, yeah. Even though he did possibly more than anybody else to destroy the country I've ever seen in recent memory. You have a lesson, for example, on the Endeavour space mission. It's used to instruct students that, quote, some arrogance is necessary for women and minorities to be successful in a white male-dominated society. Well, that's very quickly changing. That's very quickly changing from the mosques that are popping up all over the place. But this is the image that was shown for that legend. And they have this lady by the name of, is it Mae Jemison? Mae Jemison, first black woman in space. And on the whiteboard, on the interactive board, whatever it is, says, some arrogance is necessary for women and minorities to be successful in a white male-dominated society. Everybody was thrilled about space, but I remember being really irritated that there were no women astronauts. Of course, that's the whole thing. That's the intersectional element in a nutshell. And of course, you cannot say anything unless it's negative about the British Empire, for example, particularly used as a tool to push critical race theory narratives. For example, in a lesson about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, however the hell you say that, which took place in India in 1919, students are told to consider, quote, reparations, and instructed to frame their learning about the evils of the empire like German students learning about the Holocaust. To compare the British Empire with Nazis is truly chilling. Yes, because the British Empire were the premier force at the time of abolishing slavery all throughout the empire. And yes, there were some things that happened in the empire that were not good. Amritsar, for example, springs to mind. But what did we do? What did we do after Amritsar, for example, to the general? What's his name? I've forgotten his name. It's Kurt something. Is it Kurt Douglas? I think his name was Kurt Douglas. Yeah, he was court-martialed and imprisoned, as far as I know, for like the rest of his life, if I'm not mistaken. But I know he was heavily punished, put it that way. I don't believe he was ever allowed to serve in the military again after the Amritsar massacre. But of course, it's students of today that are being told to consider things like reparations when they had no part in I don't even know how to say it, the Bagh massacre. I'm just going to call it the J massacre. They had no part in this J massacre. In fact, they're about 3 or 4 generations removed from this. So why do they need to pay? But no, of course, this is what it's all about, pushing things in order to extract money and power. It always has been. So this is what the document he's referring to is, ladies and gentlemen. How does it make you feel? The J Bar Massacre. This is from November 22. Talk prompts. King Charles should definitely say sorry, but that isn't enough. British government should pay reparations to every ancestor of someone murdered in this massacre. Poppy appeal is reparations, isn't it? No. Poppy appeal is just, remembering our fallen dead. The first flowers that grew on... That's the story of the poppies, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, if you didn't know, is that they're the first flowers that allegedly grew on the battlefields of the Great War, which was World War I at the time. And it's in memory of, obviously, our fallen war dead. And again, another thing here. Nobody who was involved is still alive. There is no point in saying sorry for something you didn't do. Yeah, exactly. We should focus on the impact this has on British citizens of Indian descent and support them as necessary. Don't really think they're that, not necessarily not that they're that bothered, but a bit like Brits today, looking at modern day Israelis, just the average Israeli, for the Sergeants massacre, for the Sergeants affair, and for the King David bombing. The King David Hotel bombing. Be like me going up to a random Israeli in the street and being like, you owe me for the King David bombing. You'd think it was absurd, and rightfully so. You'd think it was absurd, and that's exactly what our kids are being taught in these schools, which is why you need to get your kids out. You need to get them out. And they're obviously then, the biggest thing, for example, is that they're threatened. And this is quite lenient compared to what I've been told is happening with these initiatives in Welsh schools, for example, in Welsh colleges. So this is a person by the name of Jeremy Judge. It says, Dear students, you were asked to complete a written pre-reading reflection of last week's PD discussion on empire. You are being sent this email because I believe you have not done this. Please complete by Friday. If not, sad times, you will receive an L2 detention. I value your considered reflections on the history of our country and its impact on the world. So these are the people that are indoctrinating your children, and if they don't go along with it, or if they are either unwilling to go along with it, or they just simply don't do the work, then they're threatened with detention. And who knows, at the school of this caliber, that could be something that is very massively character assassinating, almost. But again, these are your children's educators, quote unquote, indoctrinators, more like. That's why that will finish off this episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. You need to get your kids, if you can. I appreciate it might not be easy or possible. If you can, you need to get them out of public school. Because there's no place for them. And that'll do it for today. Have a good morning, afternoon, good evening, good night, ladies and gentlemen. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. And we'll see you next time. Godspeed.